I would request Saima Williams to make the presentation. Saima leads the work on climate resilience and climate finance, etc. at Center for CPDI, and she has more than 15 years of experience in the advocacy, capacity development, and her focus include climate action, disaster risk reduction, climate resilience, etc. Over to you, Saima.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, SOTI. Thank you, organizers of SAIS, for having me. I'm very grateful to all of you. So I would like to start with, disproportionate effects marginalized communities face. But I would like to especially shed light on the unique perspective of Pakistan, where the marginalized communities of, women, girls, minorities, and transgenders, sometimes they face a unique set of vulnerabilities. So I would like to talk about the Pakistan's perspective. Due to Pakistan's Islamic cultural norms, the women face some unique set of vulnerabilities. For instance, in flood 2022, many women lost their lives because they tried to wear abaya before evacuation. And many women refused to be rescued by male responders, and that actually got the reason of the increased number of women mortality rate during evacuation and disaster. In rescue camps, of flood 2022, there were increased number of sexual violence and rape cases of women and girls, children. So in a patriarchal society like Pakistan, where the women are considered the symbol of honor, so the male members of the family, they decide to marry them off for their so-called safety and security purpose. So there were two type of scenarios that came to surface. In one, where due to the increased number of rape cases, they decided to marry their minor girls. They decided to marry them off. Their education got seized, and they were the victim of the early marriage. And there is also a practice of, the selling minor girls into marriage to older people. This is also a practice in some areas of Pakistan, and this practice is due to the poverty. So during disaster, this practice also becomes more visible. Because the poverty rate increases and people start selling their minor girls because they think that it is not safe to keep them in the rescue camps. And also due to poverty, this number got increased, selling minor girls into marriage with the older people. So if we look at the impact of climate change in the lives of those girls' children, so we can see that this impact is for lifetime. Their education got seized. They were married off prematurely. Impact of climate change actually varies from society to society. Customary practices and the cultural norms that actually add up to the impact of the climate crisis in any society. In Pakistan, where the education rate of girls is already very low, it has been seen that post-disaster, fewer number of girls return to schools if we compare with the boys. So this is a scenario. And also, in a patriarchal society, women are often the ones who are responsible for providing food for the entire family. They are responsible for cooking food and serving the food to the entire family. And sacrificially, sometimes they keep less food for themselves and for their daughters as well. So in those rescue camps, when they are short of food, mostly for girls and for women, this small food portion sometimes that gets more, decreased. So these are type of the impacts we see for women during climate disasters. But when it comes to transgender community, the situation is more scary. because this is the community that is often, looked down. They are severely stigmatized, and, they are discriminated to the point of hatred. So, in the evacuation process, there are instances when they are refused to be rescued, because in our society, people even don't like to touch them, and the male responders are also from the same society. So there are examples when the transgenders were refused to be evacuated, even in the relief process, even if it is a public relief process by the government or from the INGOs or the civil society, there is a system in relief that is called family number. So the relief packages are given as per the family number. And in transgender community in Pakistan, I don't know about the rest of the South Asian countries, in Pakistan there is no family system in transgenders. So of course they don't have any family numbers, so they are totally excluded from the relief system. And if they are, if they are injured, there are also no separate facilities for the transgenders in the hospitals. So again, a debate triggers if they, if they get injured during the disaster, that where to place them, in female wards or in male wards. Because there is no separate wards for them. And even if we try to place them in the female ward or in the male ward, the people in the ward, they also start objecting on their presence. That why have you placed them in our ward? So this is the type of discrimination and hatred, and how the impact of climate impact actually multiplies for these communities. And the same goes for the religious minorities. Actually, the discrimination for these marginalized groups or stigma is always there. Is it working? Okay. Okay, so, this discrimination and these discriminatory emotions are always there, but they just become more visible in the face of any climate shocks. They came to surface. To wrap up this part of my talk, I would like to come up with some of the policy suggestions. I suggest that there should be trained female workers in the rescue team to address the cultural sensitivities as well, and then the medical and paramedical staff should be trained to handle diverse, gender identities, and there should be separate facilities in the hospitals as well. And after disaster, there should be a full-fledged program to re-enroll girls students to schools. And often I think we will have to condition it with the cash transfer tied to education. Then of course, then it will work. And then, coming from this type of deeply penetrated in examples of injustices in our society, I would like to talk about the issue of climate justice. Often when we talk about the issue of climate justice, we think it is a global issue. But I would rather call it a very much local and national issue. For instance, if we talk about the Pakistan, while Pakistan's per capita emissions are very low as compared to global scale. But there is a stark disparity within Pakistan. The urban elites living in large cities with energy-intensive lifestyles, with luxury products and with luxury imports. This segment actually, mirrors the urban, global north, disproportionately impacting the Pakistan's overall carbon footprint. And I think the same goes for the rest of the South Asian countries as well. While the rural communities and the urban poor and the people living in illegal settlements, slum communities, they represent the global South. Who are more impacted by the climate change, while they are, very least contributor to it. So, while we plead our case of climate justice on global forums, I think we should champion these principles internally as well. we need to come up with the progressive carbon taxes on the luxury products, on luxury vehicles, luxury imports and energy intensive products. There should be educational campaigns for the urban elites as well, and there should be targeted robust policy and advocacy to ensure, the urban poor are not left behind in our efforts of climate action. I'm coming towards the end of my talk. So I just want to talk about the loss and damage fund has been made operational after many years, but still I think whether we talk about the loss and damage fund or we talk about the NCQG, which is aiming 1.3 trillion per year till 2035. Still, I think the both funds are at pledges stage. And so with funds or without funds, South Asia needs to come up, beyond that. I think we need to make parallel efforts while pleading our case at the global level for loss and damage fund. We need to, keep continuing our efforts internally for mitigation and adaptation measures. And if you talk about the loss and damage or NCQG funds, this process is so much complicated, and sometimes they require so much unrealistic data that it actually, they made the fund impossible to be accessible by the most vulnerable during the difficult times. So I would like to sum up with saying this: while they want to maintain a high standard of operationalization of those funds, they want to keep high standards of reporting and data collection, everything. I think we need to keep balance. They need to keep balance between maintaining high standards and the provision of those funds which are specifically for the vulnerables. So accessibility of those funds to vulnerable during the most difficult times. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Saima. Saima has brought in two important key insights. Causes of climate change could be global, but the consequences are often national and local. And she raised the whole issue of how gender inequality and gender injustice.
Thank you. So responding to your question, of course, this is the same take which I have, that when we talk about the global climate justice, it's not about the global issue, it's a very much local and national issue. If we talk about the lifestyle of rural and the urban poor who are most exposed to climate change, I think if you look at their lifestyles are the most eco-friendly lifestyles. They reuse their products, I think the most, they don't waste food, and they don't spend money on the unnecessary luxury products, or they don't overconsume. But climate justice does not only depend on the societal norms or on the economic class. It also depends on the level of I must say corruption and bad governance as well. The climate impacts varies from society to society, and it also varies from government to government. The same climate can have different impacts in one country and can have the totally different impacts in the other country, depending on the the quality of their governance. Even the same I think the corruption and bad governance also impacts our mitigation and adaptation measures as well. We also keep on advocating for global funds, but what about the the previous funds which have already have been to our countries? So a lot of corruption cases and the bad governance have jeopardized their impacts. So I must say that the climate impacts not only varies it not only depends on societal norms, it also depends on the, quality of governance. And when we talk about the, the climate justice, I think our arguments should not be the same. What we keep using at the global forums, okay, we are the least contributors and we are the most affected. This is the argument most used at the global forums, but when we come back to our home country, we keep using the, the same arguments. I'm really fed up by listening this argument from the lay person that we are the least contributors and we are the most affected. So where is the personal responsibility? So I think our global arguments should be different from our, our country level arguments. Only then we can be able to, we can see a dream of a resilient South Asia come true.
Thank you. Thank you. Dikshit.